So how'd you guys do on your overhead squat? You did okay?
Yeah.
Did everybody kind of get it?
Yeah.
It's not all that complicated, right?
No.
It's not like, oh my God, I see 800 things.
Right.
This turned, that flexed, that extended. Ah! It's not that bad. It's not that bad, at least at this area. At this level, we need to set a foundation. We need to get good at seeing a few things. And then it's just like layers of an onion, man. We'll add layers. Let's get good at one layer at a time, though, you know? Before we totally confound this thing to include a bajillion different joints and all these different muscles and all these different things that can happen. Let's stick to the feet turn out, what's happening at the knees, what's happening at the hips. We have an excessive forward lean, the arms fall forward. You got that? Good. Now, the question is what we do with that information. You guys have seen this. Yes? Mm-hmm. This is your solutions table. Probable overactive muscles. What do we do to overactive muscles?
Stretch them.
Before we stretch them, what do we do to them?
Foam roll.
We foam roll them, right? So we foam roll and stretch these guys. And then these are some exercises to help increase the activity of our long muscles. So all it is short muscles on this side, long muscles on this side. Release and stretch short muscles, activate and integrate long underactive muscles. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, so these are the short guys. We're going to stretch and release them. That makes sense, right? If a muscle is short, we want to do what to it to get it to optimal length?
Inhibit it.
We want to lengthen it. And if a muscle is long, we want to do what with it? Shorten it, which we're going to do by increasing its activity, by working it. You guys with me there?
Yeah.
Now, I know this probably seems a little... what's the word I'm looking for? Probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense just laid out in this format. This is the KISS version. Anybody know what KISS is?
Keep it simple.
Keep it short and simple. For those who are using the non-TC version. Alright, so this is the keep it short and simple version. You guys could memorize this and you would be well on your way to understanding corrective exercise. But I am going to take you through at least one or two solutions to show you how the math works out. I don't want you guys to think that this is voodoo. There is a logic behind this. So, I'm going to show you guys how to work this out, and then maybe you can work out a couple others on your own. Let's start with an anterior pelvic tilt. APT, anterior pelvic tilt. The first thing we need to do is figure out what joints are involved. What joints are involved in an anterior pelvic tilt?
Hip.
Hips and lumbar spine. Alright? So you got your hips and your lumbar spine. Now the next thing we have to do is we have to figure out what joint actions happened to get us from neutral to an anterior pelvic tilt. You guys with me? So when I went from neutral to anterior pelvic tilt, what joint actions just happened? Let's start with the hip. 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 Flexion. Okay? So hip flexion. What happened at my lumbar spine?
Extension.
Extension. The hard part's over. You guys can give yourself a big round of applause. The hard part's over. If you can get that far, the rest of it is just simple. I don't want to say math because I know math scares people, but it's like simple fill in the blank. What are my hip flexors? Psoas. Keep going. Iliacus. You got two more and a group that can assist with it. Piriformis. Not piriformis, it's on the wrong side. Where are these muscles?
IT.
Front side or back side?
IT.
Adductors as a group can. What about the one in your quads? Isn't there a muscle in your quads that can hip flex? Because you guys all do your quad stretch like this, right? And you go like this, right? Go into extension. Rectus femoris. And we're missing one other nasty little bugger.
Yeah.
We'll probably foam roll later. It uses the IT band as its tendon.
TFL.
The tensor fascia lata.
TFL.
All right, those are my hip flexors. What are my lumbar extensors? Your erector spinae, and one more big one that most people don't think of as a low back muscle. Your lats. Thank you. Guys, those are all your short muscles. That's it. That wasn't bad, right? How many of you did I just scare to death with functional anatomy? Raise your hand. Let me make one more thing clear, because I want everybody to pass their exam. If you can't do that, if those muscles don't look familiar to you, you need to go home and study. You cannot pass the exam without knowing your functional anatomy. I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that because I care. I want you guys to pass. Now, what are we going to do these muscles that are short? We're going to release and stretch. The only discrepancies you'll see in your solutions table come from things that either we can't release, like, can you release your psoas and iliacus? Yourself. Can you foam roll your psoas and iliacus? No. Your psoas is underneath your abdominal wall, connecting to your lumbar spine and going down to your lesser trochanter. Your iliacus is on the inside of your pelvis. You could try to hit it with a foam roll. You're probably going to squish a lot of other stuff, though. Don't squish other stuff. You guys can write that down. Don't squish other stuff. All right, so when you see something like, you don't see, I'm sorry, where are we here? Low back arches. You see hip flexor complex, you don't really see individual hip flexors. It's because some of them can't be done. Can we foam roll our TFL?
Yes.
Can we foam roll our rectus femoris?
Yeah.
Right down the middle of our quad. Can we foam roll our adduct?
Yes.
Sure. When we stretch our hip flexors, how do we do it?
Kneel or
The kneeling hip flexor stretch. You guys have all seen this one, right?
Yeah.
Like the NASM. Everybody's like, oh, it's NASM hip flexor stretch, right? So that one knocks out a bunch of them. How do we stretch our adductors? What I'm saying is when you get to your programming and you guys see examples, it's the same as this. Don't get scared and go, well, why did they pick that and not that? It's probably because, hey, they listed this out, but this they couldn't release. So they released what they could. They picked a stretch that hit all three of these. So we don't need to write them out individually. You guys with me? And then how do we stretch our erector spinae and lats?
ball.
Child's pose?
Yeah.
I'm going to teach you guys child's pose. Forget the ball for now. It's just easier, takes less equipment, and you'll get a nice low back stretch out of it too. And how many of you guys do yoga? Tell me child's pose just doesn't feel awesome. Doesn't it feel awesome? We're doing child's pose today. Alright, so, how do we get long muscles? Right. How do we figure out what our muscles are that are long?
Opposite to the short.
It's the opposites. So now what we're going to do is go hip extension, lumbar flexion, then we have glutes, and we have, well, rectus femoris, or, yeah, you can put hamstrings up here as long for hip extension. But then what does lumbar flexion?
Abdominal.
Rectus abdominis. Who else? Who else does lumbar flexion?
Obliques.
Obliques. And then just a little secret, guys. How many of you guys have heard of your TVA? Anybody heard of their TVA? Draw-in, transverse abdominis activity. Anytime you have postural dysfunction that involves the lumbopelvic hip complex, your TVA is going to shut down. It might not get long or short, so to speak. What would lengthening of the TVA look like?
Yeah, like a fat belly.
Abdominal distension. Right? This is TVA lengthening. Very sexy looking. Alright, so when you see abdominal distension, that's lengthening of the TVA. What are we going to do with these muscles? Strengthen them. So we go over here, low back arches, we see prone iso abs. Would that be effective for these guys?
Yeah.
That's a plank for those of you guys who don't know. Why we can't call prone iso ab at NASM a plank, I have no idea. But it's a prone position isometric abdominal exercise that everybody else calls plank. So, prone iso ab, quadruped opposite arm leg raise.
Yep.
Right, that would be good. Hip extension, glute activity, takes a lot of stabilization, takes my TVA, holding my lumbar spine segmentally in place. And bridges, what are bridges good for?
Hamstrings.
Glutes, hopefully more glutes than hamstrings. I will say this about hamstrings, guys. Your hamstrings are long and overactive. That's weird, right? Like they should be long and underactive, but they're not. They're long and overactive because they become synergistically dominant for an inhibited glute complex. You know what we do with long and overactive muscles? Nothing.
Leave them alone.
You're confused. When you stop being confused hamstrings, I'll deal with you. You guys get what I'm saying? You can release them a little bit. If you guys want to foam them because they're really sore and they feel really neuromuscularly tight, fine. Don't stretch them though. And if you strengthen them, you're only going to make them more synergistically dominant. So don't strengthen them either. You guys can make a little leave the hamstrings alone. Does that kind of make sense how I got here? Kind of. I know some of you guys need to go back and study your anatomy, but can you see the logic at least?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool.